Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our launch of the Green Climate Fund's Bahamas Readiness Toolkit. My name is Lindy Bowe, and I am your moderator for this morning. We are going to get started very shortly, but before we do, I would just like to thank all of our viewers for logging on with us this morning, whether you are on from the Ministry of Environment Facebook page, the 5Cs website, or our YouTube link. Thank you for joining us, and we would like to encourage you to take 1 second, click the share button, click the like button, text a friend, tell a friend, get them online with us. So we're going to get right into things. We have a great session prepared for you all this morning, and we're going to start off with a brief introduction from Dr. Rihanna Neely. So we're going to invite her onto the screen now. Okay. Good morning, Dr. Neely.
Good morning, Lindy, and everyone that has logged on for this morning. As Lindy said, we do have a very exciting session this morning. It's not going to be long and drawn out, but I would just like to welcome everyone that is signed on. So let's get started. To the Minister of the Environment and Housing in the Bahamas, the Honorable Ramon Ferreira, Dr. Colin Young of the 5Cs, and Mr. Pa Jaju of the GCF. And welcome to all of our private and public sector stakeholders. I want to wish you a very good morning. And welcome you to the of the 5Cs and welcome you to the GCF Bahamas I Readiness Toolkit launch and premiere of the short film on climate change in the Bahamas. This has been a very long time in coming. We began work on this first readiness in 2017. And through a series of workshops and events, we have arrived at this point with a toolkit and procedures that are ready for sharing that are also in line with the GCF's requirements. Thank you to all of our stakeholders that have participated and provided your input thus far, and we look forward to a successful webinar this morning and to increasing our engagement with you in the future. So hang in there. We're going to be on here for a few minutes and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Dr. Neely. We are going to turn it over now to Mr. Pa Jaju from the Green Climate Fund. He will be bringing brief remarks.
Thank you, and good morning to you all. Honorable Ramon Ferrer, Minister of Environment and Housing and the National Designated Authority for the Bahamas, Dr. Colin Young, Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, Dr. Jonelle Kane, the Project Development Specialist, Caribbean Community Development Climate Change Center, Dr. Rihanna Neely, Head Climate Change Unit, Ministry of Environment and Housing in the Bahamas. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Executive Secretary of the Green Climate Fund, it is my distinct pleasure to be part of today's launch of the GCF Bahamas Readiness I Toolkit. The Division of Country Program of the Green Climate Fund, as part of its mandate, seeks to equip developing countries with the knowledge and capacity to facilitate access to climate finance resources channeled through the GCF. This requires instituting a number of integral processes based on national circumstances in developing countries. It is for this reason that the Green Climate Fund Readiness Program supports participatory activities which includes strengthening country coordination. Countries can also access up to $1 million annually from the Green Climate Fund through our updated readiness program to engage in capacity building for climate finance coordination, strategic framework for low emission investments, developing paradigm shifting pipelines, and engaging in knowledge sharing and learning. In addition, cognizance of the need to build adaptive capacity in developing countries, and to build resilience. Countries can also access up to $3 million specifically for adaptation planning activities. The GCF is pleased that the Bahamas, a country which has been actively engaged over the years in climate finance negotiations under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, submitted its first proposal to the GCF in 2016. Since then, the Bahamas has sought and received approval for a GCF readiness pipeline amounting to $1.98 million, out of which $950,000 has been disbursed to date. As part of this support, the GCF proposed amendments for an increased uptake of the Bahamas 2019 allocation and to fast-track the approval of the Bahamas' fourth readiness program, which was under development during the passage of Hurricane Dorian. This readiness, titled Building Blocks for Strengthening the Bahamas Country Program, with an approved amount of $0.95 million, sought, among other actions, to develop comprehensive vulnerability and needs assessment to identify, evaluate, and prioritize climate response options. The most recent readiness proposal in the Bahamas pipeline seeks to build on this trend by seeking to address some key vulnerabilities identified in the health sector of the Bahamas, worsened by the passage of Hurricane Dorian and further exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic. This proposal seeks to enhance the systems for surveillance of climate-related vector-borne diseases in health facilities in the Bahamas. Ladies and gentlemen, I elaborated the foregoing to really demonstrate that readiness action forms part of a solid foundation for future implementation of impactful, paradigm-shifting, and country context-driven transformation climate change projects, which are responsive to the needs of countries. This toolkit, developed under the Bahamas Readiness, is a key aspect of this path to concretize climate action. The information contained in the toolkit will be useful not only for the Office of the National Designated Authority, but also for other national stakeholders who play a pivotal role in the sectors in the Bahamas. It provides a good understanding of what the GCF stands for, the national mechanism set up for assessing information and resources available from the GCF, as well as information on various actors one would encounter in doing so. In a nutshell, it seeks to assist the NDA and the GCF task force in demystifying the Green Climate Fund and making that information available to all Bahamians. And so the GCF celebrates with the Bahama and 5Cs as a delivery partner on this achievement. May this launch mark the continuation of a collaborative effort at the country level to demonstrate true country ownership in programming of GCF resources for the Bahamas. I wish to reiterate the GCF's commitment to supporting the Bahamas in meeting its goal under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. The GCF regional support team are ready, willing, and able to provide guidance in your continued engagement with the GCF. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity to participate in today's launch. The GCF stands ready as a partner, forward, upward, and onward together. Once again, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for those remarks, Mr. Jaju. We're going to bring now to the screen Ms. Dr. Colin Young from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. He will also be bringing brief remarks. But before he comes, just a little housekeeping. Remember to share our video, encourage others to join onto the live feed. And also, you're going to be hearing a lot of acronyms today. The Green Climate Fund has its own language. So just for those that may not be familiar, GCF means Green Climate Fund, and you're going to hear the term NDA a lot this morning. That stands for National Designated Authority, and in the Bahamas, the Ministry of the Environment is the National Designated Authority for the Green Climate Fund. So, Dr. Colin Young. Okay, we appear to be having some technical difficulties with Dr. Young. We're going to get those resolved in a second. But we are going to continue. So.
Okay, is it resolved?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, and we apologize for the little technical glitch. Apparently, I was on mute. Good morning once again. And Honorable Romal Ferreira, the Minister in the Ministry of Environment and Housing in the Bahamas, Mr. Pa Jaru from the Green Climate Fund, Dr. Daniel Kane, our Senior Project Development Specialist at the Center, Dr. Neely, also from the Ministry of Environment and Housing in the Bahamas, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to all of you. It is my privilege to provide brief remarks on behalf of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, known as the 5Cs, on this occasion of the virtual launch of the GCF Bahamas Readiness Toolkit. This project commenced in 2017 after the government of the Bahamas approached the 5Cs to prepare and submit on its behalf a GCF readiness project that would strengthen its national mechanisms to access additional climate finance. The proposal was successful, and in January of 2017, the GCF would approve a $300,000 grant for what would become known as the GCF Bahamas Readiness I project. This project was designed to deliver two very important outcomes that are key to the government's desire to access financing to fund its low-carbon, climate-resilient development pathway. These two outcomes include: one, strengthening the technical and institutional capacity of the Ministry of the Environment and Housing as the National Designated Authority, or the NDA, to effectively engage with the GCF. The second outcome was to develop the capability to formulate the strategic frameworks for further engagement with the Green Climate Fund, including the identification of investment priorities and preparation of country programs. A key output from the project was the development of a toolkit that will, one, provide critical guidance to the NDA to perform its roles and responsibilities, and two, foster greater in-country awareness of the National Designated Authority, its role, and services it offers among key stakeholders, as well as to foster greater understanding of the operational modalities of the Green Climate Fund. Today's launch is testament that the project successfully developed the toolkit. The 5Cs is pleased to have been the delivery partner alongside the government of the Bahamas for the successful implementation of this GCF Bahamas Readiness I project. Even as the needs of countries increase, spurred by the escalating and adverse impacts of climate change, the international climate change financial architecture, regretfully, has become more complex, diversified, and sometimes more difficult for small island developing states to access. As a regional direct access entity accredited to the Green Climate Fund since 2015, the 5Cs has been playing a pivotal role in assisting Caribbean countries in accessing climate change resources to improve their climate resilience. The 5Cs can submit funding proposals to the GCF and manage projects up to $50 million per project on behalf of its member states. In addition to increasing the climate finance flow into the region as a delivery partner, the 5Cs also works with countries to develop their national capacities to directly access climate resources, as well as to provide climate data to inform evidence-based decision-making. To date, the 5Cs has been very successful in mobilizing financing for the region. Since commencement of its operations in 2005, the center has leveraged and mobilized over $260 million in resources for its member states. Since its accreditation to the GCF in 2015, the 5Cs has successfully mobilized over $36 million on behalf of member states, including the government of the Bahamas. This is made possible because the 5Cs has set up a project preparation facility within its project development and management unit to assist our member states to develop project proposals for submission to the Green Climate Fund. The 5Cs is now well placed to manage climate finance from the GCF and other development partners. We offer a unique combination of fiduciary capacity, knowledge of the region, and ability to mobilize technical skills in shaping the region's climate change agenda. These attributes have bolstered our track record and boosted the confidence and trust of our CARICOM member states and partners to continue to work with the center. Additionally, the center continues to actively exercise its mandate to coordinate the region's response to climate change at the level of CARICOM. I am pleased to report that tangible results are already emerging from the GCF's readiness support to the Bahamas, to Belize, and Guyana, which has aided the elaboration of a GCF country program and national capacity building efforts for engaging with the Green Climate Fund. Similar success stories are anticipated for other countries for which the center also serves as readiness delivery partner. Besides readiness projects, the 5Cs is also implementing a $45.2 million project in Barbados, with $27.6 million coming from the Green Climate Fund that will ensure a climate-resilient water sector in that country. The 5Cs is also implementing several other project preparation funded activities aimed at mobilizing additional resources for climate action across the region. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, today's workshop signals the end of the first readiness project for the Bahamas, which is the basis to define a country-driven and inclusive consultative process intended to guide the Bahamas' engagement with the Green Climate Fund. I therefore encourage you to take full advantage of the toolkit presented here today, sharing your perspectives and ultimately crafting a pipeline of high quality and bankable investment options to take forward to the Green Climate Fund for financing in the short and medium term. The 5Cs will continue to work with the government of the Bahamas to unlock financial resources to improve the Bahamas' resilience to climate change. It is in this light that I take this opportunity to reaffirm the Center's commitment to supporting the Bahamas' bold ambitions and leadership in responding to the vagaries of climate change. We continue to work with the Bahamas in the implementation of two other readiness projects, one in the health sector and another for national adaptation planning in the development pipeline. We look forward to working closely with the government of the Bahamas and the Green Climate Fund to support the country's climate change aspirations. I wish you the very best outcome from today's session, and thank you very kindly for your attention. And please do stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young, for your remarks. We now take it to Minister Ramal Ferreira, who is the Minister of the Environment and Housing here in the Bahamas. He will also be bringing brief remarks.
To Mr. Pa Usman Jaju from the Green Climate Fund, Dr. Colin Young, Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and salutations. The government of the Bahamas, through the Ministry of Environment and Housing, is honored to host this webinar this morning to launch the toolkit for the Green Climate Fund's National Designated Authority and to debut the short film on the impacts of climate change in the Bahamas. Along with our partners, the Caribbean Climate Change Center, the Bahamas Readiness I project, which is funded by the Green Climate Fund, sought to support to build capacity within the Ministry of Environment and Housing as the national designated authority for the Green Climate Fund. The objective was achieved through the successful completion of several activities, which led to very important outputs, such as NDA personnel trained in operational modalities of the Green Climate Fund, the development and elaboration of a country strategic framework for the Green Climate Fund, public awareness materials disseminated to key national stakeholders, definition and elaboration of a nationally appropriate process for no objections, development and execution of workshops and training. The toolkit is also a major output and resulted from various activities completed under the project. It has provided guidance to the ministry to perform its roles and responsibilities and continues to be used as a general awareness raising tool to promote the services of the NDA and GCF operational modalities among key national stakeholders. Climate change and the impacts of climate change are of critical importance to the Bahamas. From the slow onset events like sea level rise and ocean acidification, or acidification of the soil as well, or storm events like Hurricanes Dorian and Matthew. Climate change has severely altered the way we work, live, and play in the Bahamas. We have to work as a global community if we are to be successful at winning this fight for the world that we once knew. We are thankful to the Green Climate Fund as the largest contributor to national governments in this fight, and we look forward to what can be achieved through this partnership. To our colleagues at 5Cs, your support has been invaluable. To date, we have 4 readiness projects worth $2 million approved with your assistance, and we're not done yet. To all of the stakeholders signed in, the Green Climate Fund is indeed the world's largest dedicated fund, helping developing countries reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and enhance our ability to respond to climate change. Your understanding of this toolkit will only enhance our collective abilities to respond to climate change and to access the critical financing that is so desperately needed to address the changes that we are already experiencing. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this most important webinar and launch this morning. And I wish and pray that it all goes well, and I invite everyone to stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Ferreira, for those remarks. Now we are going to get to the meat of the reason why we are all here today. We are going to have a joint presentation on the launch of the Green Climate Fund's Toolkit. This will be done by Dr. Rihanna Neely from the Ministry of Environment and also from Dr. Doniel Kane from the 5Cs. During this time, we encourage you to post any questions, comments, or concerns you might have in the comments section. We will answer them during a brief Q&A section after the launch of the toolkit presentation.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Morning, everybody that's tuned in. Morning to the distinguished guests that have joined us. Morning, well, I guess it's either morning or late evening in South Korea, to our colleagues who are online in South Korea. It is a pleasure for us to be here today to present on the toolkit, but also to use this opportunity to continue to raise awareness about the work that the Bahamas is doing as it relates to climate change, as well as the Green Climate Fund and how is it we could access resources to the Green Climate Fund. Rihanna, any remarks before we get into the presentation?
No, I think we have had a lot of remarks so far. We can really just jump into why we're all signed on.
All right, perfect. All right, so the 5 Cs, as you'd have heard, partnered with the government of Bahamas to put together a readiness project, which was approved in 2017. The readiness project comes to an end at the end of this month, 31st of October, 2020. This after 3 extensions and 3 justifiable extensions. One was related to Hurricane Dorian and the impact of Hurricane Dorian on the Bahamas, really impacting our ability to carry out the stakeholder consultation that is needed to really execute the project activities. The other was related to COVID-19. There was a 6-month extension because we should have finished somewhere around February, March of this year, but we had to extend the project again just so we could complete as much of the activities as we could. The aim of the project was basically to empower the Ministry of Environment and to build their capacity as a national designated authority to bolster engagement with the Green Climate Fund. Some of the expected outcomes of the project were for us to build the capacity of the national designated authority, as we said. We also wanted to ensure that there were tools in place such that the national designated authority could engage with the GCF effectively. One other outcome of the project was for the project to formulate what we call a country program, which is the identification of strategic actions or prioritized action that the government of Bahamas would want to see funded by the Green Climate Fund, as well as to put in place an institutional system for coordination and engaging with stakeholders right across the islands of the Bahamas. The total for the project has been mentioned by 2 previous presenters was about US $300,000. The main activities that the project tried to deliver was to establish a working group that would, we'll talk a little bit more about what the no-objection procedure is a bit later, but it was to establish that working group to basically provide no objection for projects that are going to the GCF. The other aspect was the development and operationalization of guidelines for the NDA, and as well as train the staff of the National Designated Authority in the Bahamas. We also developed key tools, and one of those tools is a toolkit that we have here, which highlights some of the critical aspects that stakeholders need to consider when engaging with the Green Climate Fund. We also aimed at conducting high-level awareness events, and you could consider this as one of those high-level awareness events. We also developed a public awareness strategy, which empowers the NDA to basically engage with all stakeholders across the Bahamas, as well as international partners, such as the Green Climate Fund, and regional partners, such as the 5 Cs and the CDB. It also identifies how the GCF can build on upscaling some of the work within the Bahamas, and as well as I mentioned earlier, develop the country program. Some of the outputs, as you could see there are several different strategic documents that were developed. I mentioned some of them: the communication strategy, the country program, the toolkit, which is amongst there. There was a stock take report, which tells us where it is Bahamas is at the moment in terms of its readiness for climate action in the Bahamas. So let's get into what is the toolkit, and this is why we're here today. We want to launch this toolkit. We want persons who are logged in and watching to really go online. We'll provide a link to where the toolkit is. We want you to engage with the document. We want you to read the content that's in there. We also feel it is important for you to continue to engage with the National Designated Authority of the Bahamas, as well as the 5 Cs if needs be. So the toolkit is basically aimed at helping the National Designated Authority to really convene national stakeholder sessions. It provides the modality through which nomination letters for direct access entities will be provided, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is in a bit. It also provides guidelines for how a no-objection letter is obtained from the National Designated Authority for project proposals that will be submitted to the GCF. It also identifies how is it readiness projects are developed and approved by the GCF, but also how they are submitted by the National Designated Authority to the GCF. And it also provides information on how the country should go about leading the way in developing its country program, and how is it that this country program should be updated. One thing I must mention is that the toolkit is a live document, and as such, it will be periodically updated, and we'll speak a little bit more about the update of the current toolkit, just to ensure that it is always adapting to the changing environment of the GCF, as well as the changing environment within the Bahamas. It also identifies several key features of the GCF which are important for accessing the GCF, and it speaks to the different modalities of the GCF. It speaks to accreditation process and what is required for that process. It also speaks to readiness projects, what is required for readiness project, as well as how is it you go about developing a full funding proposal. So I'll just walk through some of the things that are within the toolkit, just to give you an idea of what's there and how it is you're supposed to interpret the information there. The GCF is the largest multilateral climate finance mechanism that exists to date. It is supposed to be capitalized to the tune of 100 billion per year. I know there has been some struggle in the GCF realizing those commitments, but it is still the largest funding agency climate change financing mechanism that exists today. The GCF aspire for a 50-50 split in terms of adaptation and mitigation. And for those out there that are probably new to the adaptation and mitigation or climate change landscape, or what those concepts are, mitigation basically speaks to reducing or avoiding CO2 emissions, whereas adaptation speaks to our ability to cope with the changing climatic regime that we now face. The GCF works in 4 thematic areas under each of those, mitigation and adaptation. In terms of mitigation, they're looking to, as I said, reduce CO2 emissions associated with the generation and production of energy. They're looking to preserve our forests and promote proper land use management and use. Part of that being related to, again, reducing or avoiding CO2 emission. They're also looking to promote low carbon emission transport mechanism or transport systems, and as well as looking at our cities, urban space, and industry to ensure that we we reduce CO2 emissions that are associated with that. So if you have projects that are related to any one of those thematic areas, you want to consider how it is you could engage the GCF as it relates to mitigation. On the other side of the coin, adaptation, they are looking at helping us to deal with matters related to health, water, and food security. We're also looking at addressing the needs of vulnerable people and communities. There's also actions related to ecosystem preservation and conservation. And I know in the Bahamas, the ecosystem there, particularly marine ecosystem, is very important for the Bahamas, as well as it looks at building our infrastructure more resilient to climate change. And of course, Bahamas is no stranger to that, given the impacts of Hurricane Dorian and how it has impacted the infrastructure within the Bahamas. So there are activities that we could propose to the GCF aimed at building resilience in the infrastructure that we have in the Bahamas. The different types of funding modalities that exist within the Bahamas include grant funding, it could be concessional loans, there is equity, and of course there are guarantees that could be used to finance this sort of projects. Just to mention another aspect of the GCF is that the GCF also has what we call a private sector facility. That facility is dedicated to engaging with the private sector for actions related to climate change. How can we access the GCF? So we could access it in two ways. As an accredited entity, the 5Cs is an accredited, a regional accredited entity to the GCF. And what that means is that you are able to submit funding proposal and concept notes to the GCF for funding. So we work closely with the governments of the region, and in this case, the Bahamas, which also means engaging with stakeholders on the ground to ensure that we are building out projects that respond to the needs of the persons on the ground. These projects are then submitted to the GCF. The entity that becomes accredited, or the AE, must demonstrate a strong track record in implementing projects. We also have to demonstrate that we have policies and processes in place. We must have experience with the issue of climate change, and because this is not a development fund, it is a climate fund. So we have to ensure that whatever we're putting forward is addressing an issue related to climate change, and also demonstrate experience managing and climate financing. The other way you could access the Green Climate Fund is as an executing entity. So many of the stakeholders here, viewing this live presentation, might find yourself on the executing side, where you're partnering with, say, a 5Cs as an accredited entity. And the executing entity is the entity that's supporting the 5Cs in the development of the project. But also on the implementation side, the executing entity is really helping to mobilize the resources on the ground for the implementation of actions related to climate change. Just to say, in the region, there are several different accredited entities besides just the 5Cs and CDB. There are other accredited entities that are operating in the Bahamas. Some of them are listed on that slide there. They're also contained within the toolkit, so you could go through that and see the different accredited entities that are available to the stakeholders in the Bahamas. Just to speak a little bit about becoming accredited to the GCF, and this is also detailed in the toolkit. What it means to become accredited to the GCF, it means you have been assessed by the GCF and are found to be worthy of or have the capacity to develop and implement climate change project. We are encouraging countries in the region to get their national entities, in particular development banks accredited to the GCF, to support in mobilizing financing for climate change action in the region. This slide basically just gives us some idea of what it takes to become an accredited entity to the GCF. It's in 3 stages and it's detailed in the toolkit. So if you are interested, you're an entity out there, a development bank, an NGO, a development partner, and you're interested in becoming a ministry, and you're interested in becoming accredited to the GCF, you want to take a closer look at how is it you become accredited to the GCF. But in a nutshell, it means doing a self-assessment. The GCF has a self-assessment questionnaire that's online. You'd have to do that self-assessment exercise. You would need a no objection letter from the NDA or a nomination letter from the GCF. The GCF then assesses your policies in terms of what policies that you have in place. Do you meet their environmental and social standards? Do you meet do you have a gender policy in place? Do you have the necessary fiduciary systems in place to manage GCF projects or GCF resources? And at the end of the process, what you do is actually sign what is called an AMA, which is the Accreditation Master Agreement. Don't forget, though, that you have to pay your accreditation fee to the GCF to become accredited. So how does this engagement with the GCF works in the Bahamas? Yeah, as was mentioned, I think it was first mentioned by Lindy, and thank you, Lindy, because as climate change experts, we tend to use the acronyms and forget that we need to speak very open, very down to earth to the stakeholders. So we tend to use the NDA and not spell out what it means. So that's a national designated authority. As was mentioned, the Ministry of Environment and Housing is the national designated authority in the Bahamas. They are the persons that you would go to for additional information on the Green Climate Fund. If you have a project that you want to submit to the Green Climate Fund, the national designated authority is the entity to go to. The 5C stands ready to support that effort, but at the end of the day, any project or concept that is going to be submitted to the GCF requires the national designated authority to sign off on that project as being part of the country strategic programming direction going forward. The national designated authority, which is the Ministry of Environment and Housing, plays a critical role in supporting stakeholders, an accredited entity like the 5Cs, to access resources from the GCF. With that, I'll just hand over to Dr. Neely briefly to just speak about the work of the Ministry of Housing, and then I'll pick up the presentation from there. Dr. Neely?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kane. So as he would have mentioned, the Ministry of the Environment is the national designated authority in the Bahamas. This was through cabinet decision, and we have been engaging with the Green Climate Fund, the 5Cs, and several other executing agencies and accredited entities since our approval as the NDA. Now, I'll talk about some of the work that we've been doing. Many of you would have met with us already, as we would have been doing work to get to this point, to get to the launch of this toolkit. So your input has already served into the formulation of our country program and the strategic climate change agenda in the Bahamas. So we can move on. I would like to speak now about the no objection procedure that Doniel alluded to. While we're waiting for the slide to load, Doniel also mentioned private sector. I need the slide on no objection procedure, please. We have been over the last few years desperately trying to engage the private sector. Now, we have a lot of private sector interests out from outside of the country. However, we need to engage, and we would need to see more engagement from the private sector in the Bahamas. So I would encourage all of those that are listening from the private sector right now. We have a private sector engagement set of events coming up next month. We will be reaching out to you. Please make yourselves ready to engage with the Green Climate Fund so that you will be able to participate and assist us as we address climate change in the Bahamas. So for the no objection procedure, the primary purpose of this no objection procedure is to ensure a country-driven process, one. So what that means is that we don't want other countries or other agencies or other entities around the world to dictate to the Bahamas how we should address climate change within the Bahamas. So this no objection procedure ensures that whatever is sent to the Green Climate Fund is in line with the country program and the country strategic strategy that we would have developed with the assistance of our stakeholders in the public and the private sector. So it keeps us essentially focused, and it keeps us on task with what it is that we said, what we say we want to be doing immediately and in the medium and in the long term. The country program is updated around every 5 years. So we will be reaching out in the next few years again to our stakeholders as we would make a determination, do a stock take as to where we are in addressing our climate change needs, as well as what we need to do in the future. And I think Dr. Kane alluded that it is a living document. So it changes, and not because something or a project is not listed on the country program or in the country program. If that event or if that issue becomes important at a particular time, then we can add it to the country program. So if your sector is not listed at this time, that does not mean that it is not a priority. It can be updated. So first, let's move to the slide. The NDA may engage, or any partner may engage with the NDA in an attempt to submit a project to the Green Climate Fund. An accredited entity may approach us as the NDA with a concept note or a letter to say, well, this is what we would like to do, and this is how we see this rolling out and benefiting the Bahamas. The NDA, according to the official no objection procedure, will receive the request, and we will review the concept note and discuss it, prepare a report and discuss it with the National Climate Change Committee. Now, in the Bahamas, we have not yet established that connection with the NDA and the National Climate Change Committee, but that is coming very soon. So what has been happening essentially right now is in the Bahamas is that the NDA would assess projects that have been submitted. Many of the projects that we have submitted so far to the GCF have been public sector projects. We have one that we submitted a no objection earlier this year that was from the private sector, and that was through a cabinet decision that this is something that the country would like to follow up with. Okay, so the NDA will review the recommendations of the NCC once we have that connection established with the NDA and the NCC, and make a final recommendation to the GCF as to whether or not we would like for this project to be form part of the programming of the Bahamas with the GCF. We also have to let the public know. We should also let the public know that this is where we're going. This is the direction that we'll be going, and we prepare essentially a letter to the GCF that outlines the project, some of the details of the project, and I advise the GCF that the Bahamas has no objection to participating in this project. It should be clear that at this time, this does not commit the Bahamas to any does not give us any financial obligations or any obligation to actually follow through with the project. It is merely an indication on our part that this is in line with our country program. This is in line and it follows through the process. And this is a project that we see that may be able to benefit us in the short, medium, and long term. Okay, so once the GCF receives that letter of no objection in association with the concept note, the accredited entity will submit both of those at the time of submission to the GCF, and we will start the project or the process of the GCF review at that time. So I'll hand back over to Doniel. and he'll carry on with the rest of the presentation.
And thank you very much, Dr. Neely. All right, so I just want to use the opportunity to speak to two things. One is the different modalities within the GCF, and the second thing is the project cycle for developing a funding proposal for the GCF. I borrowed this infographic. It's not in the toolkit, but it's a very simplified demonstration of the GCF different modalities. It's borrowed from the Green Climate Fund. And as you could see to the left of that diagram where we have the country and entity programs, which is informed by national priorities. And what we've been doing is going through those stakeholder consultation. And the very first section there talks about readiness and delivery partner, where 5Cs has been that delivery partner. So what we've done so far is we've developed these tools to support the NDA as well as support stakeholders on the ground in Bahamas to access finance or start to engage more meaningfully with the GCF. So the readiness is supporting that, and we're doing several other things related to getting national entities accredited to the GCF, as well as engaging the private sector more meaningful, as well as develop concept notes as part of the readiness project. So we've been doing quite a bit, and I'll speak a little bit more to that towards the end, just the next steps. But once we have concept notes developed, once we have our stakeholders engaged, once our stakeholders understand clearly how the mechanism of engaging with the GCF work, we can then approach the GCF with either a funding proposal, or we could request what we call project preparation funding, which is the PPF there. Once you have a concept note developed, the idea is that you might need resources to move that concept to a funding proposal. What the PPF facility does, it allows us to do things like the feasibility study, to conduct the environmental and social impact assessment, and develop alongside that the environmental and social management plan. You may need to conduct gender and stakeholder analysis, and also associated with that gender action plan and stakeholder engagement and management plan. So the PPF facility allows us to build out that package that is needed to submit to the GCF as a funding proposal. Note here that the key thing is the pipeline of projects, and you want to ensure that your pipeline of projects are aligned with the country program. So before we could move to the process of developing a funding proposal, it must be articulated in that strategic document, which is a country program that the NDA and stakeholders in Bahamas have articulated under this readiness. Again, the country program, like the toolkit, they are living documents, and they must be updated periodically. And as Dr. Neely just mentioned, it doesn't mean that if you look at the country program at the moment and you don't see a project related to your sector, it doesn't mean that your sector isn't a priority. It means there's an opportunity for you to engage with the NDA to bring your project into the country program. Just to speak a little bit about the project cycle of the GCF, the submission of a concept note to the GCF is voluntary, but we encourage that, because once we submit a concept note to the GCF, we get some feedback from the GCF on whether that concept note fits with their strategic direction, or whether it fits with their investment area, or whether it is aligned with their expectations of addressing climate change issues or reducing CO2 emissions. So we could use a two-step approach in getting our funding proposals to the GCF. The other benefit of submitting that concept note is that it is assessed, and whether we will determine whether we need project preparation funding to advance that concept note to a funding proposal. And by the GCF assessing that concept note, they would see some of the gaps that we would have in developing that funding proposal, and so would suggest where there are areas for us to consider when implementing a project preparation funding, assuming that your entity doesn't have the resources to conduct the necessary studies, as I just alluded to. Once the concept note is, is submitted to the GCF, they have a committee within the GCF, a climate investment committee, that does a review of the concept note and gives us feedback. It's an iterative process. You could expect to get, some comments on the concept note, and you'd have to improve on it. It's the same thing for the funding proposal as well. You will get comments on it, and it's an iterative, a back and forth process between the stakeholders and the GCF until that funding proposal gets to the point where it is then submitted again to, at the division it's reviewed, and then at the Climate Investment Committee, it's again reviewed. Once the Secretariat feels comfortable with the funding proposal, it goes to the board, and even before it goes to the board, during that process, it's reviewed by what we call ITAP, which is an independent technical advisory panel. Once that concept note is reviewed by ITAP, it makes a recommendation to the board as to whether the funding proposal should go ahead or not. Of course, once you have a project, let's say the project is approved by the board, all the legal instruments, the GCF has just made some changes to how this works. They're now trying to fast track some of the legal requirements before the board decision is made, just so we minimize the amount of time needed to sign what is called the funded activity agreement for the project. And once the funded activity is signed and effected, what it means by effected meaning all the conditions set out in the funded activity agreement have been met, then the GCF will make first disbursement and we could begin implementation. So that just gives you a snapshot of what is entailed in the funding proposal, in developing a funding proposal and getting it approved. Of course, the funding proposal submission to the GCF, as I mentioned before, requires no objection letter from the NDA, and Dr. Neely has detailed what has been happening with that process. I would also suggest that you continue to engage with the National Designated Authority to understand if the process has evolved, and continue to engage with the toolkit because the National Designated Authority will be updating the toolkit in the event that things have changed on the ground, just to keep persons informed as to the requirements for engaging with the NDA and the Green Climate Fund. So where are we now? As I mentioned at the top of this presentation, this readiness project, the first for Bahamas, and I must say we're particularly proud of Guyana, Bahamas, and Belize, because these three readiness projects served as a stepping stone for many other countries in the region. Some of the lessons learned from these projects have really helped other countries in the region to implement their own readiness project. But where are we going? We're coming to the end of this. It means we need to take it to the next step. And so we have a second readiness project, which is approved. And that readiness project is engaging with the private sector in the Bahamas. In fact, coming out of that, we're hoping to have at least one concept note coming from the private sector. So you could look out for that engagement coming soon. And if you're a private sector entity out there watching this, please engage with the National Designated Authority to understand more about what's happening as it relates to the GCF and how your entity could engage with the GCF to build your resilience to climate change, or even mitigate CO2 emissions. It's also intended to develop and implement a reporting verification system for the Bahamas. And we are hoping to support at least one entity in the Bahamas to become accredited to the GCF. Those are three activities that are on their way. The technical support needed to implement each of those three main activities have been procured, and pretty soon the NDA will be contacting stakeholders if they have not already done so. The third readiness that we have with the Bahamas emerge out of this first readiness, where we recognize clearly that based on what is presented in the country program, there is still need to engage with stakeholders. There still need to develop concept notes and funding proposal that articulates the priorities of the country. As such, we recognize that need and developed a readiness project around that need. And here we're hoping to develop at least 3 concept notes out of this readiness. We're hoping to update the country program once these concept notes are developed. And we're hoping also to update the toolkit as part of this consultancy, at least as things evolve on the ground in the Bahamas. And we're hoping to conduct some feasibility studies to identify technologies and solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation in the Bahamas. The other stage of our engagement with the Bahamas, on the heels of Dorian and COVID-19, the health sector also engaged with the NDA and the 5 Cs to develop a readiness project geared towards the health sector. Part of what the Ministry of Health wants to do here is to strengthen the linkage between climate change and health and to put in place surveillance systems related to climate change and health, as well as build out projects that are applicable to the sector. We also have in the pipeline a national adaptation planning proposal that is being developed, and we're hoping to have that submitted to the GCF by the end of December, the end of December this year. What that project intends to do is really to build out, the Bahamas better than I do. There are several islands across the Bahamas. The idea is here, some of these national adaptation strategy and plan for the Bahamas. This national adaptation plan proposal and the plans that emerge, they are not disentangled from the country program. The country program is a strategic document for engaging with the GCF, but the national adaptation plan is more overarching and ensures engagement with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is UNFCCC. I had to check myself there not to use the acronyms. But it's an overarching document that helps the country to engage more broadly on climate change adaptation in the Bahamas. And lastly, we intend to continue to foster capacity building among stakeholders and partnership with national, regional, international stakeholders, especially the private sector. We recognize the importance of the private sector to the Bahamas and the importance of building the resilience of the private sector in the Bahamas to climate change, as well as ensuring that they are putting effort towards mitigating greenhouse gas emission. And with that, I thank you very much. As you could see on your screen, the toolkit, it could be found via the Ministry of Environment and Housing website, the 5 Cs Clearinghouse, and you could find additional information on the Green Climate Fund via those listed websites that are on your screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee and Dr. Kane. We're going to open the floor now for anyone that has comments to post them in the comment section, whether you're watching on Facebook or Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. You can post your comments and we will have our panel address them. I noticed that we had one comment about the policy. I'm not sure if we're talking about this toolkit, but you can access it from the Bahamas government website. You can also send us an email and we can forward it to you. The email is min, M-I-N, of environment and housing at bahamas.gov.bs. Once again, the email address is min of environment and housing at bahamas.gov.bs. We can forward you all of the documents. So we're going to take a second, and you can post all of the questions that you may have. And if there are no questions, we'll move on to the next portion of today's webinar. Okay, so we have a question for Dr. Neely. What is the official policy? I am interested to see if our Ministry of the Environment has any plans in that regard, working to create the necessary infrastructure or helping with education or incentives.
Thank you for the question. Okay, so yes, this toolkit, this policy, we have several policies surrounding climate change in the Bahamas, and several of them are actually being updated. But this toolkit and our country program is a guide that will assist you in where we are with climate change and addressing climate change. We have several education initiatives that we have ongoing to help people to understand climate change a bit better. One of them is the short film that we will be premiering in a few minutes to help people see how we are actually being impacted by climate change, things that you can do, things that the government is actually doing to address climate change. And this is a fluid process. The more that we start to do, the country program being our guide, and other policies like the adaptation policy that is in the pipeline as well. We will continue to engage with the stakeholders so that it is not a top-down approach from the government dictating to stakeholders what should be happening. In many instances, stakeholders are the ones that are feeling the impacts of climate change at the micro level, and they are able to explain to us some things that are changing that they're experiencing. Maybe your crop yields have changed. So we will work with stakeholders very closely to make sure that our message is tailored to the impacts that are being experienced in the Bahamas, New Providence, Grand Bahama, and all of our family islands.
Thank you, Dr. Neely, for that response. We also have a question that I think would be appropriate to direct towards the Minister. So, Minister Ferreira, we have a question for you. What is the strategic plan for the Bahamas? Is there a link to some information?
Strategic plan in relation to what?
I'm not sure. They just asked for a strategic plan generally.
I'm not quite sure what exactly you're asking me. Strategic plan in relation to what?
Let's see if our commenter can give us some clarity on what she's asking. In the meantime, we also have a comment that I would like to read. Oh, wait, Minister Ferrero, you can. So the question is on the electric vehicles policy.
Okay, so you mean, is there a strategic plan to increase the penetration of electric vehicles in the Bahamas? I guess that's what you're asking me. So the Ministry of Environment and Housing, certainly since we've been in tenure, the short answer is yes. I've seen a strategic plan produced, and we made our comments to the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, who was assisting and leading that charge. We have made our position clear here at the Ministry of Environment that we support increased penetration of electric vehicles. We've lobbied within Cabinet and with Customs to reduce the import duties to where they are now, and we will continue that work until we achieve complete penetration of all vehicles, particularly government-owned vehicles and government fleets, as electric. We look at this as a very urgent climate change response.
Thank you, Minister Ferrero. We have another question. I'm going to direct this for either Dr. Neely or Dr. Kane to respond to. What are the in-school parts of this program? So many of our school-age young people are so not aware of this phenomenon impacting us.
I could take a bit of that. Thank you very much for that, Lindy, and thank you very much for that question. The 5 C's has in the past, and we're currently updating, I think, that curriculum. We have what we call a 1.5 curriculum, and we've rolled out here in Belize that curriculum amongst high school students. I think going forward, the intention is to update the curriculum firstly, and then to roll it out more widely across the Caribbean. The short film that we intend to preview or launch in a few minutes. When we were developing that, we were thinking about this group of stakeholders in terms of the youths. And part of that was how is it that we could start to engage with the schools. We actually have a project that we recently implemented with resources from the government of the Bahamas and the Italian government through the 5 C's in a school where we implemented renewable energy at the school. And actually the students played a great role in implementing that project. And so those are the sort of initiatives we want to see going forward. As part of the stakeholder engagement process in these readiness, it is something for us to consider how we could meaningfully engage with that young demographic today of the Bahamas.
I want to add to that to say specifically that in the Bahamas, the Ministry of the Environment and Housing has been working with the Ministry of Education to reach young people K through 12 with respect to climate change, and we have provided them already with resources that will assist them in delivering the message of climate change at age-appropriate levels. And we will continue on with the program and with the Ministry of Education. One such program is the pilot of the Anatole Rogers solar installation that we will actually have a virtual ceremony on Friday. The students at that school were able to assist the contractors with the construction and installation of the 250 kilowatt unit at that school and the energy efficient components. So we definitely have an understanding that this is an important stakeholder group and we don't need them to be left behind, and we're working to make sure that they are on this wave with us as we're moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Neely and Dr. Kane, for your responses. If there are no more questions at this time, we will move on to the premiere of our climate change readiness, our climate change short film. I would like to highlight, however, that if you have questions, you can still post them in the comment section and we will try and address them at the end of the short film. But sit back and enjoy. This is a short film about climate change in the Bahamas, and I hope that you learned something by the end of this film.
It affects us every day, and we are surrounded by it. Yet most of us don't really know what it is or how to recognize it. It's climate change. And believe it or not, it is a problem that needs our immediate attention.
Climate change is a change or an alteration in what we expect from our climate systems on average globally. You usually look at climate change over a period of 30 years or more. So it is not the weather that we look at daily, but it's average changes in our weather patterns and in our atmospheric conditions over a 30-year period or longer.
We enjoy a land filled with natural treasures and exotic creatures, breathtaking beaches, and an ocean teeming with fish. But these precious resources are increasingly at risk due to climate change. Climate change affects the way our marine animals live and reproduce in our waters, and it affects how and what we grow on land. The reality is, our beaches, fish, and native crops may not be around to be enjoyed by our children or their children.
If you go back, let's say 10, 15 years ago, there was a time when fish was everywhere. And because of climate change and the storms and the hurricanes, we have seen it diminish in fish, in trout, in lobster, in grouper, and snapper.
Over the past 5 seasons that we've been having a really intense warm spell quite early in the season, like in April sometime. And actually this past season that really put a
hit on my crop, and I essentially had to end sooner than I would have usually.
Our climate is warmer than it used to be. Warmer climate presents warmer oceans, and warmer oceans are the perfect environment for the development of devastating hurricanes, like Hurricane Dorian, the most devastating event in Bahamian history. This Category 5 hurricane cost us heavily in lasting infrastructural and economic damage, and more importantly, human lives.
People are still struggling in Abaco. A lot of people are moved to the States. Abaco is known for, its attraction for, the boating community and yachting community, high-end homeowner community. And, everybody's gone.
If climate change continues on this track, what we can expect to see are more intense storms like Dorian. We may not see more frequent storms, but the storms that we do get will be very intense.
Another less obvious effect of climate change is land erosion. We are literally losing miles of land mass as coastlines erode due to rising sea levels. Rising sea levels, higher water tables, and storms naturally require that we construct stronger buildings and other infrastructure. This means higher costs for private construction projects and more expenditure for national infrastructural projects like roads and coastal barriers.
We are now seeing more Category 4 storms, more Category 5 storms, and then there's Category Dorian. So the building code is undergoing a change right now. What that will see in many instances is an increase in hurricane straps, higher foundations. Maybe we look to building on stilts.
Solving the problem of climate change requires that we all change. This is why the government of the Bahamas has established an energy policy with the goal of converting to 30% renewable energy by 2033. Through financial investment from the Green Climate Fund, and partnership with the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center and other donors, the Bahamian government has already implemented several green climate initiatives, as well as incentives for those moving toward climate-conscious living.
The government has introduced incentives to encourage Bahamians to purchase solar panels and energy-efficient appliances into their homes. If you were to buy a non-energy efficient appliance, you may pay 45%, for example, on a washing machine. But if you get the energy-efficient one, the duty rate is 5%.
The Bahamian government has also planted several flagship projects with the intent of replicating these models throughout the wider public sector.
We have 2 projects that have been completed. One is the solar installation at the Thomas A. Robinson Stadium. That is almost 1 megawatt of solar power. And the second one is a pilot project at the Anatole Rogers High School, which is 250 kilowatts of solar panels installed on the school.
Most of the negative effects of climate change are due to everyday citizens like you and I, how we live, consume, and interact with our environment. Fortunately, there are very easy and practical adaptations we all can make that will have a hugely positive and lasting impact on our environment and our climate. It doesn't matter which corner or which island you live on. Now is your time to change.
The future generation will suffer tremendously because we didn't put the right perspective in place to preserve a future for our future generation.
A healthier climate means a higher quality of living and increased opportunity for all. It means a healthier environment and a country that we can proudly pass on to generations to come.
So there's a Native American proverb that states, we do not inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children.
We are losing land. Our temperatures are rising. We're losing our natural resources with respect to our coral reefs, our fish, our farming. We're losing these things as a result of climate change. So it's not a particular set of people's problem. It's everybody's problem. Just like tourism is everybody's business, climate change is everybody's business.
And the best way forward toward a healthier, better Bahamas is together.
Thank you for tuning in with us. I hope you enjoyed our climate change video. We will be uploading it so that you can watch it at a later time as well. I think we should all hashtag climate change is everyone's business. Do we have any more questions from the comment section? Any general questions? Now we would address them if we have any. I noted that we had a comment that I would like to read. As a young environmentalist, I feel it's important to introduce sustainability into the school's curriculum. It's important that the young generation understand the issues we, as SIDS and other SIDS, face so that coming up there will be more passion in wanting to mitigate and adapt against climate change. This was a comment that was posted, I believe, on our YouTube stream. We wanted to highlight that we do have young environmentalists coming up. I'm one young environmentalist, and I know that a lot more people are now coming into this industry. So if we don't have any more questions, I guess we can now wrap up. We'd like to thank you for logging on, whether you are on the Ministry of Environment's Facebook page or on the 5C's YouTube page. We'd like to thank you for logging on, and we are going to invite Dr. Kane to bring some closing remarks. But just before he comes, we would like to say a special thank you to our team here at the Ministry of Environment who organized this event, our climate change unit, as well as especially Ms. Brittany Lindsay and Ms. Ebony Blyden for their assistance. We'd like to thank the 5Cs and Ms. Michelle Lopez and her team for the organizing. We'd like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. And we also want to encourage you to join us this Friday, same time, same place, where we will be discussing our renewable energy projects, in particular the one installation that we have at Anatole Rogers. So we noticed that we had some comments about the energy policy, and that would be a great time to tune in and to get more information. So right now we are going to bring Dr. Kane onto the screen to bring some closing remarks. Okay, Dr. Kane is having some technical difficulties. I believe that his mic is muted.
Thank you very much, Lindy. My apologies. Morning again, everyone. I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us today, for tuning in, for listening to what we had to present here today. I implore you to go out and review the toolkit that is available via the Ministry of the Environment and Housing website, as well as the 5C's clearinghouse. I just want to say thank you very much to Mr. Jaju, Director of Country Programming from the Green Climate Fund, and his team that is tuned in. I know it's very early there in the morning. I think probably it's 2 a.m. in the morning there. So thank you very much for staying up this late to present to us, but also to participate in this launch. I also want to say thank you very much to Minister Ferrer from the Bahamas for taking time out to give his remarks. I know these are busy times, given what's happening with COVID in the Bahamas and right across the Caribbean and the globe. I also want to say thank you very much to Dr. Young for taking some time out to give remarks at this launch event. Thank you very much to everybody who tuned in online and participated. Lindy, thank you very much for your effort. I think you did a very wonderful job in moderating this event. To the team here at 5Cs, from our communications unit to our finance unit that supported the implementation of this project through to the end, I just want to say thank you very much for all your support. And we hope to have that continued support as we engage with the Bahamas and other member states in CARICOM. With that, I want to say again, thank you everybody who took time out to be here with us. As Lindy said, join us again on Friday as we demonstrate, we dig deeper into that project that was presented for the high school, the renewable energy project. Join us again here so we could look at that a little bit closer and understand what is it the Bahamas is doing in terms of renewable energy. Again, feel free to reach out to the Ministry of Environment and Housing, which is the NDA, as well as feel free to reach out to the 5Cs, and you could ask for me in particular if there's any clarification that you need on anything that was presented here today. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon or morning, and afternoon where you are, or early morning wherever you are. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe.